Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Storm. Roger Stevenson stood in the hospital corridor, his weathered hands trembling as he held his 8-year-old son Jake close. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across his angular face, highlighting the crow's feet that had deepened over the past 6 months. At 42, Roger had built his reputation as Millbrook's most reliable contractor, known for his attention to detail and unwavering integrity. Today, those very qualities had just shattered his world. "Daddy, why did the policeman tell us to run?" Jake whispered, his small fingers clutching his toy car, a red Mustang that Roger had given him for his birthday just weeks ago. Roger's jaw tightened as he watched Officer Haley emerge from room 314, his face grim. The carpet in Carmen's hospital room had hidden more than just an uneven floor. Beneath that thin ridge Jake had discovered lay a recording device, sophisticated enough to capture every conversation, every whispered secret, every moment of intimacy between Roger and his wife during her week-long stay after her appendectomy. "Sir, we need to talk." Officer Haley approached, his voice low but urgent. "What we found, someone's been monitoring your family very closely. This isn't random surveillance." Roger's mind raced. Carmen had insisted on this particular room, claiming the view of the hospital's garden would help her recovery. She'd been adamant about it, even arguing with the nursing staff when they initially assigned her to a different floor. Now he understood why. Who would do this? Roger asked, though deep down, a cold suspicion was already forming. "We're investigating, but given the sophistication of the equipment, this was planned by someone with resources and technical knowledge. Someone who knows your routines, your schedule." Officer Haley paused. "Mr. Stevenson, has your wife mentioned anyone new in her life recently? Any new friendships or connections?" The question hit Roger like a physical blow. Carmen had been different lately. Distracted, secretive about her phone calls, working late at the interior design firm where she'd been employed for the past 3 years. She'd brushed off his concerns, attributing her behavior to stress from a demanding new client. "There is someone," Roger admitted reluctantly. "Benjamin Whitney. He's her new business partner at McDermott and Associates. She's been working on some big project with him." Officer Haley made note. "We'll need to interview both of them. In the meantime, I strongly suggest you and your son stay elsewhere tonight. If someone's been monitoring your family this closely, your home might be compromised too." As they walked toward the elevator, Jake tugged on Roger's sleeve. "Daddy, is Mommy in trouble?" Roger looked down at his son's innocent face, those bright blue eyes that mirrored his own. "I don't know yet, buddy, but whatever happens, you and I are going to be okay." The elevator doors closed with a soft ding, and Roger caught his reflection in the polished steel. The man staring back wasn't the trusting husband who'd arrived at the hospital that morning. This man had questions that demanded answers, and Roger Stevenson had never been one to walk away from a problem without solving it completely. His phone buzzed with a text from Carmen. "Where are you?" "I'm worried sick." Roger stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. "Taking Jake for ice cream. Rest up. We'll talk tomorrow." But Roger had no intention of waiting until tomorrow for answers. Chapter 2. Foundations Built on Lies. 3 years earlier, Carmen McDermott had been the ambitious young designer who'd caught Roger's eye at the Millbrook Community Center charity auction. Fresh out of design school, she'd been volunteering to redecorate the children's playroom when Roger arrived to donate his contracting services. Their chemistry had been immediate and intense. "You know," Carmen had said, running her manicured fingers along the shoddy drywall work, "this place needs someone who actually cares about quality." Roger had laughed, charmed by her directness. "Lady, I've been doing quality work in this town since before you could hold a paintbrush." "Prove it," she'd challenged, her green eyes sparkling with mischief. Within 6 months, they were married. Roger had been 39, ready to settle down with someone who shared his passion for creating beautiful spaces. Carmen was 28, ambitious and eager to build her own design firm. They'd seemed perfect together, his practical skills complementing her creative vision. The first 2 years had been good. Roger had helped Carmen land her job at McDermott and Associates, using his connections with local builders and developers. She'd flourished in the role, quickly becoming one of their most sought-after designers. They bought the house on Maple Street, a beautiful Victorian that Roger had painstakingly restored room by room. Then Benjamin Whitney had arrived. Whitney was everything Roger wasn't. Polished, sophisticated, with an MBA from some expensive East Coast school and family money behind him. He joined McDermott and Associates as a senior partner, bringing with him connections to high-end clients and luxury projects. At 35, he drove a Tesla, wore custom suits, and spoke about design trends and market opportunities in ways that made Carmen's eyes light up with excitement. Benjamin thinks I have real potential, Carmen had gushed after Whitney's first week. He wants to mentor me, help me develop my own client base. Roger had felt the first stirrings of unease then, but he'd pushed them aside. Carmen was passionate about her career, and he'd always supported her ambitions. If Whitney could help her succeed, Roger was willing to give the man the benefit of the doubt. Now, sitting in his truck outside his brother's house where he and Jake would spend the night, Roger pulled out his phone and called his longtime friend and former Army buddy, Tim Wagner. Tim ran a private security firm in the city, specializing in corporate investigations. Roger? Christ, it's been months. What's going on? Tim, I need your help. Someone's been surveilling my family, and I think it goes deeper than the police realize. There was a pause. How deep are we talking? Deep enough that I found professional-grade recording equipment hidden in my wife's hospital room. Deep enough that I think my marriage might be a lie. Jesus. Okay, I'm listening. Roger explained the situation, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his chest. Tim listened without interruption, occasionally asking clarifying questions. I can have a team sweep your house tomorrow, Tim said finally. But Roger, if this is what I think it is, you need to be prepared for what we might find. I'm prepared for anything except being played for a fool, Roger replied. If Carmen's been lying to me, if she's involved with Whitney, I need to know everything. Every detail, every conversation, every moment they've spent together. And then, Roger looked through the window at Jake, who was building a fort with his cousin's Legos, his face bright with innocent joy. His son deserved better than a broken home built on betrayal. But he also deserved a father who wouldn't tolerate deception. Then I make sure they understand the cost of betraying a Stevenson. Chapter 3. The Web Unravels. The next morning brought rain and revelations in equal measure. Tim's team had arrived at the Stevenson house at dawn, their electronic equipment packed in unmarked cases. What they found was worse than Roger had imagined. Your house is wired like a television studio, Tim reported grimly as they stood in Roger's kitchen. Cameras in the bedroom, living room, even one in your home office. Audio devices throughout. Someone's been watching your family for months. Roger's hands clenched into fists. How long? Based on the installation marks and dust patterns, I'd say 6 months minimum. Maybe longer. 6 months. That was when Carmen had started working late, when she'd begun guarding her phone like a state secret, when she'd suddenly become interested in upgrading their security system. A suggestion she'd claimed came from reading about neighborhood break-ins. There's more, Tim continued, his expression darkening. We found this hidden in your bedroom closet. He handed Roger a small device no bigger than a matchbox. GPS tracker. Military grade. Someone's been monitoring your movements, too. The implications hit Roger like a sledgehammer. This wasn't just about Carmen having an affair. This was systematic, calculated surveillance of his entire family. Someone had been studying their lives with the precision of a military operation. I want to know who, Roger said, his voice deadly quiet. I want to know everything about Benjamin Whitney, his background, his finances, his connections, everything. And I want to know exactly what my wife has been doing for the past 6 months. Tim nodded. I'll have preliminary reports by tonight. But Roger, once we start pulling this thread, there's no going back. Are you sure you're ready for what we might find? Before Roger could answer, his phone rang. Carmen's name appeared on the screen, her photo smiling up at him. A picture from their last anniversary dinner, when he'd still believed their marriage was real. Where are you? Carmen's voice was strained when he answered. The police were here asking questions about Benjamin. They want to interview me this afternoon. What kind of questions? About our working relationship, about the projects we've been collaborating on. Roger, I don't understand what's happening. Why would someone put surveillance equipment in my hospital room? Roger studied his reflection in the kitchen window, watching the rain streak down the glass. I don't know, Carmen. Why don't you tell me? There was a long pause. What do you mean? I mean, maybe it's time for some honesty in our marriage. Real honesty. Roger, you're scaring me. Good, he replied calmly. Because I'm scared too. Scared that the woman I married, the woman I've trusted with my life and my son's life, might not be who I thought she was. He could hear Carmen's sharp intake of breath. How can you say that to me? Because someone with intimate knowledge of our family has been watching us for months. Someone who knew our routines, our schedules, our habits. Someone who could predict exactly when and where to place surveillance equipment for maximum effect. You think Carmen's voice cracked. You think I was involved in this? I think, Roger said slowly, that you've been lying to me about Benjamin Whitney. I think your late nights at work haven't been about work at all. And I think whoever's been watching us has been getting their information from someone on the inside. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. I'll be home tonight, Carmen said finally. We need to talk. Yes, Roger agreed. We do. After he hung up, Tim placed a hand on his shoulder. You know there's a good chance she's going to lie to you again tonight. Roger nodded. I'm counting on it. But this time, I'll know the truth before she opens her mouth. He looked out at the rain, thinking about the Victorian house he'd restored with his own hands, room by room, board by board. He'd built it to last forever, just like he'd thought his marriage would last forever. But Roger Stevenson had learned long ago, during his tours in Afghanistan, that the most dangerous enemies were often the ones who shared your bed, your meals, your secrets. He trusted Carmen with everything that mattered to him. That trust was about to become their downfall, not his. Chapter 4. Intelligence Gathering. By evening, Tim had delivered 3 thick folders to Roger's brother's house. They sat at the kitchen table while Jake watched cartoons in the living room. The sound of his innocent laughter a stark contrast to the evidence spread before them. Benjamin Whitney isn't who he claims to be, Tim began, opening the first folder. Real name is Benjamin Warren. Changed it legally 5 years ago. He's got a history of targeting successful small business owners and their spouses. Roger studied the photographs Tim had gathered. Whitney at expensive restaurants with various women, all of them married, all of them connected to profitable family businesses. A professional home wrecker, more sophisticated than that. He seduces the wives, gathers intelligence about their husbands' businesses and assets, then systematically destroys the marriages while positioning himself to benefit financially. Look at this. Tim spread out financial documents showing Whitney's pattern. In Kansas City, he befriended the wife of a successful restaurant owner. 6 months later, the husband lost his business in a messy divorce, and Whitney opened a competing restaurant using information he'd gathered about suppliers and recipes. In Denver, he targeted the wife of a construction company owner. That marriage ended with the husband bankrupt and Whitney somehow winning the contract for the city's biggest development project. Roger felt something cold and dangerous stirring in his chest. And now he's targeting my wife to get to my business. It gets worse. Tim opened the second folder. Whitney's been paying for the surveillance equipment. We traced the purchases through a shell company he controls. But he's not working alone. The next set of photographs made Roger's blood freeze. Carmen and Whitney in intimate embraces, kissing in his Tesla, entering a luxury hotel together. The timestamps showed these photos were taken during hours when Carmen had claimed to be working late on client projects. How long? Roger asked quietly. Based on these surveillance photos, at least 4 months. But there's evidence of contact going back 8 months. Phone calls, emails, meetings disguised as business dinner. 8 months. Before Jake's birthday, before their anniversary, before countless nights when Carmen had come home late, claiming exhaustion for demanding clients, falling into bed beside him like nothing had changed. The third folder contained the most damaging evidence. detailed plans of Roger's business operations, client lists, financial records, and project timelines. All information that only Carmen would have had access to in their home office. She's been feeding him everything, Tim said grimly. Your client contracts, your pricing strategies, your upcoming projects. Whitney's been using this information to underbid you on municipal contracts and steal your biggest clients. Roger thought about the 3 major contracts he'd lost in the past month. Jobs he'd been certain to win, projects where his bids had been competitive and his reputation solid. In each case, a new company called Pinnacle Construction had swooped in with bids that were impossibly low, as if they'd known exactly what Roger was proposing. Pinnacle Construction, Roger said. That's Whitney, majority owner through another shell company. He's been systematically destroying your business while destroying your marriage. The surveillance equipment was probably meant to gather evidence for a divorce proceeding that would leave you with nothing. Roger closed the folders and sat back in his chair. In the living room, Jake was building another fort with pillows and blankets, creating his own safe little world where betrayal didn't exist and parents kept their promises. There's one more thing, Tim said carefully. Carmen's pregnant. The words hit Roger like a physical blow. What? Hospital records show she's 8 weeks along. The appendectomy story was a cover. She was having pregnancy complications. Had to stay for monitoring. Roger's mind reeled. 8 weeks pregnant. If Carmen was carrying Whitney's child, it would explain the secrecy, the lies, the elaborate surveillance setup. Whitney would need leverage for a divorce that gave him access to Roger's assets while protecting himself from any claims of adultery. They're planning to destroy me completely, Roger said, his voice deadly calm. Take my business, my house, my son, leave me with nothing. That's how it looks. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Roger stood and walked to the window, watching the rain continue to fall. Somewhere across town, Carmen was probably rehearsing the lies she planned to tell him when he came home. Whitney was probably planning his next move, confident that his surveillance network would give him advance warning of any threat. They were about to learn that Roger Stevenson was not the kind of man who went quietly into bankruptcy and humiliation. I'm going to give them exactly what they want, Roger said finally. Tim frowned. What do you mean? They want to watch me? They want to know my every move, my every plan. Roger turned back to his friend, and Tim was surprised by the cold smile on his face. Then I'm going to put on one hell of a show. Chapter 5, The Setup. Roger's return home that evening was a masterpiece of controlled performance. He knew every camera, every microphone, every angle of surveillance in his own house. As he walked through the front door, he was no longer the betrayed husband stumbling through discoveries. He was a contractor setting up the most important job of his life. Carmen was waiting in the living room, her auburn hair perfectly styled despite her supposed illness, wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She rushed to embrace him, but Roger noticed how she positioned herself, always keeping her face away from certain angles, as if she knew exactly where the cameras were hidden. Roger, I was so worried. Where's Jake? Staying at my brother's tonight. I thought we should talk privately. Roger's voice was gentle, loving even. Anyone listening would hear a concerned husband seeking reconciliation. What they wouldn't hear was the subtext, the careful way Roger positioned himself near the hidden cameras, ensuring his face was clearly visible as he delivered his performance. Carmen, I owe you an apology. I was scared today, paranoid. The thought of someone watching our family made me crazy, made me say things I didn't mean. Carmen's relief was palpable. Oh, Roger, I was terrified you thought I was involved somehow. Never, Roger lied smoothly, pulling her into his arms for the cameras. I know you'd never betray our family. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Over Carmen's shoulder, Roger caught sight of one of the hidden cameras Tim's team had identified. He wondered if Whitney was watching live or if he'd review the footage later. Either way, Roger wanted to make sure his next words were crystal clear. I've been thinking about expanding the business, he said, leading Carmen to the couch. Taking on some bigger projects, maybe government contracts. There's a massive development project the city's planning. Affordable housing complex worth about $12 million. Carmen's eyes sharpened with interest. $12 million? That's huge for Millbrook. Huge for us too. If I win the contract, we'd be set for life. I could finally give you and Jake everything you deserve. Roger stroked her hair tenderly. But it's confidential right now. The city council hasn't announced it publicly yet. How did you find out about it? Council member owes me a favor. But Carmen, you can't tell anyone about this. Not your colleagues, not Benjamin Whitney, not anyone. If word gets out before the official announcement, I could lose my chance to bid. Carmen nodded eagerly. Of course, sweetheart. Your secret's safe with me. Roger smiled and kissed her forehead, all while staring directly into the hidden camera across the room. I know it is. I trust you completely. Later that night, after Carmen had fallen asleep beside him, Roger slipped down to his home office. He made a show of working on confidential documents related to the fictional development project, leaving papers scattered across his desk where the cameras could capture them clearly. The documents Tim's team had prepared were masterpieces of deception, authentic-looking city letterhead, realistic project specifications, and a timeline that would require immediate action. Any contractor viewing this information would see an opportunity too good to pass up. More importantly, the project details were designed to be irresistible to someone like Whitney, a chance to underbid Roger by significant margins while still maintaining healthy profit margins, all based on inside information about material costs and timeline requirements. The next morning, Roger kissed Carmen goodbye with apparent affection. I'm meeting with suppliers today about some upcoming projects. Might be late. I'll probably work late too, Carmen replied. Benjamin wants to discuss some new opportunities. Of course he does, Roger thought, but his smile never wavered. Have a good day, sweetheart. 30 minutes after Roger left, Carmen was on her phone. Tim's electronic surveillance, legally installed by Roger in his own home, captured every word of her conversation with Whitney. Ben, you need to hear this. Roger's found out about a major city project. $12 million. He thinks it's confidential, but if we act fast. Roger listened to the recording in Tim's van, parked 3 blocks away. Hearing his wife's eager betrayal in real time was like watching a slow-motion car crash. Devastating, but somehow inevitable. She's taking the bait, Tim observed. Hook, line, and sinker. Phase 2 starts tomorrow. What's Phase 2? Roger's smile was colder than winter rain. We're going to make Benjamin Whitney believe he's won the lottery. And then we're going to teach both of them that some things in life are too good to be true. Chapter 6. The Trap Springs. Within 48 hours, Benjamin Whitney had taken every piece of bait Roger had laid out. Tim's surveillance showed Whitney making frantic phone calls to investors, liquidating assets, and committing Pinnacle Construction to the fictional development project with promises of massive returns. The beauty of Roger's plan was its simplicity. Whitney's greed and overconfidence made him predictable. Presented with an opportunity to destroy Roger's business while securing his own fortune, Whitney didn't stop to verify the information Carmen had provided. He simply acted just as he'd acted in Kansas City and Denver. But Roger Stevenson wasn't some naive restaurant owner or small-time contractor who could be easily outmaneuvered. Roger was a combat veteran who'd spent 2 tours in Afghanistan learning how to identify and eliminate threats to his unit. He'd simply applied those same skills to civilian life. Whitney's committed everything, Tim reported from their surveillance van. He's borrowed against his personal assets, convinced 3 major investors to partner with him, and submitted materials orders worth $2 million. All based on a project that doesn't exist. Roger watched Whitney's Tesla pull into the parking lot of McDermott and Associates, where Carmen would be waiting to celebrate their apparent victory. They believed they'd manipulated Roger into revealing confidential information that would make them rich while leaving him bankrupt. Any word from the police investigation? Roger asked. Officer Haley says they've traced the surveillance equipment purchases back to Whitney's shell companies. They're building a case for stalking and invasion of privacy, but it's going to take weeks to put together. Too slow, Roger said. By then, Whitney would have time to cover his tracks, maybe even pin the surveillance on Carmen. Make her the fall guy while he disappears with whatever money he can salvage. Roger had no intention of letting either of them escape consequences. Carmen's betrayal cut deeper than Whitney's. She'd been entrusted with his heart, his home, his child's welfare. She'd chosen to weaponize that trust for personal gain. Phase 3, Roger announced. That evening, Roger came home with flowers and wine, playing the role of a husband celebrating a potential windfall. Carmen met him at the door with enthusiasm that would have seemed genuine if he hadn't known better. "How was your day?" she asked, taking the flowers with apparent delight. "Promising. Very promising. I think our finances are about to change dramatically." Carmen's eyes sparkled, whether with genuine affection or greedy anticipation. Roger no longer cared to distinguish. "Tell me everything." They sat together on the couch where they'd made so many plans for their future, where they discussed having more children, where Roger had once believed they were building something permanent and beautiful. "The city council made their decision today," Roger lied smoothly. "The development project is mine. $12 million guaranteed." Carmen's gasp of excitement seemed real enough. She threw her arms around him, pressed her lips to his, played the part of the devoted wife celebrating her husband's success. "Roger, this is incredible. We'll be able to pay off the house, expand your business, maybe even buy that cabin you've always wanted. Maybe even expand our family," Roger said, watching her face carefully. For just a moment, Carmen's mask slipped. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach before she caught herself. "Maybe," she agreed softly. Roger felt something break inside his chest. Not his heart, which had already shattered, but something harder and more fundamental. His capacity for mercy, perhaps, or his willingness to give people the benefit of the doubt. "There's just one thing," he continued, his voice still warm and loving. "The contract signing is tomorrow afternoon. City Hall, 3 o'clock. But it's a closed meeting, no media, no outside contractors allowed. The city wants to keep this quiet until all the paperwork is finalized." Carmen nodded eagerly. "Of course. Confidentiality is crucial for these big projects." "Exactly." Roger pulled her closer, speaking directly into the hidden microphones. "I'll be the only contractor there. Just me, the city council, and our legal team. No competition, no interference. Nothing can go wrong." What Roger didn't mention was that there would indeed be a meeting at City Hall tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Officer Haley would be there with arrest warrants. Representatives from the district attorney's office would be there with fraud charges. And Tim would be there with complete documentation of Whitney and Carmen's conspiracy. But first, they would watch Benjamin Whitney arrive at City Hall with investors in tow, expecting to intercept Roger's guaranteed contract with last-minute legal maneuvers and underbidding tactics that Carmen had helped him prepare. Instead, they would find themselves walking into the most public humiliation of their lives. Roger kissed Carmen's forehead one last time, tasting the sweetness of anticipated justice. "Tomorrow changes everything," he whispered. He wasn't lying. Chapter 7, The Reckoning. At 2:45 p.m., Benjamin Whitney's Tesla pulled up to City Hall with the confidence of a man who believed he controlled every variable in the equation. Tim's surveillance showed 3 luxury cars following. Investors Whitney had convinced to partner with him on the guaranteed $12 million contract. Roger watched from across the street as Whitney emerged, adjusting his custom suit and checking his Rolex. The man looked every inch the successful businessman, which made what was about to happen even more satisfying. "Carmen's not with him," Tim observed from the surveillance van. She'll want to watch me lose everything in person." Roger was right. 10 minutes later, Carmen's BMW pulled into the parking lot. She'd dressed for the occasion. Expensive dress, professional heels, the outfit of a woman ready to publicly support her husband while privately celebrating his destruction. She walked into City Hall with the measured stride of someone who believed she held all the cards. At exactly 3 p.m., Roger entered the building through the main entrance, nodding politely to the security guard he'd known for 15 years. Whitney and his investors were clustered near the elevator bank, whispering among themselves with barely contained excitement. Carmen stood apart from them, playing her role as the supportive wife who just happened to encounter her husband's business rival at a crucial moment. "Roger," Carmen's surprise seemed genuine. What are you doing here? Council meeting, Roger replied calmly. Big contract signing. Whitney stepped forward with practiced smoothness. Mr. Stevenson, what a coincidence. I'm here for the same meeting. Pinnacle Construction has submitted a competing bid for the housing development project. Roger's expression of shock was Academy Award-worthy. Competing bid? But the project isn't public yet. How did you even know about it? Sometimes opportunities present themselves to those who keep their ears open, Whitney said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Carmen played her part perfectly, expressing confusion and concern while carefully avoiding any admission of involvement. She was, Roger realized, actually quite talented at deception. Under different circumstances, he might have admired her skill. Gentlemen, Officer Haley appeared as if on cue, flanked by two detectives Roger didn't recognize. Mr. Whitney, Mrs. Stevenson, you're under arrest. The transformation in the lobby was instantaneous. Whitney's confidence evaporated like morning mist. Carmen's face went white as bone. The investors began backing away from Whitney, as if he'd suddenly contracted something contagious. Under arrest for what? Whitney demanded. Conspiracy to commit fraud, stalking, invasion of privacy, and attempted theft by deception. Detective Sarah Mills read from the warrant. You have the right to remain silent. Carmen found her voice. Roger, what's happening? Why are they arresting us? Roger studied his wife's face. The woman who'd shared his bed while plotting his destruction, who'd carried another man's child while planning to steal his son's inheritance, who'd smiled at him this morning while counting the hours until his public humiliation. The housing development project doesn't exist, Carmen. It never existed. Every document you photographed in my office, every detail you passed to Whitney, every plan you helped him make, all of it was fabricated. The color drained completely from Carmen's face. You knew. I've known for days. About Whitney, about the pregnancy, about the surveillance equipment you helped him install in our home. I know about the other families you two have destroyed, and I know about the investors you've just defrauded with promises of a contract that was never real. Whitney lunged forward, his polished facade finally cracking. You son of a... Tim stepped out from behind a pillar, his broad frame blocking Whitney's path. I wouldn't recommend that, Mr. Warren. Or do you prefer Whitney this week? As the handcuffs clicked into place, Roger addressed the gathering crowd of city employees and curious citizens who'd been drawn by the commotion. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just witnessed the arrest of Benjamin Whitney and Carmen Stevenson for conspiracy to defraud multiple businesses and families. Over the past several months, they've been operating a sophisticated scheme to destroy marriages and steal assets through surveillance, manipulation, and fraud. Whitney's investors were already on their phones, presumably calling lawyers and trying to distance themselves from the disaster. Carmen was crying, but Roger noticed her tears seemed more focused on the public humiliation than any genuine remorse. Roger, please, she whispered as the detective prepared to lead her away. Think about Jake. Think about our family. I'm thinking about Jake, Roger replied quietly. I'm thinking about raising him to understand that actions have consequences, that trust once broken can never be rebuilt, and that some betrayals are unforgivable. He paused, meeting her eyes one last time. I'm thinking about teaching him to be nothing like his mother. As the patrol cars pulled away from City Hall, Roger felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not happiness. That would take time to rebuild. But the clean, clear satisfaction of a job completed properly, with attention to every detail and no corners cut. Tim joined him on the steps of City Hall. Phase 4. Roger smiled, thinking about the legal proceedings that would follow, the civil suits that would strip Whitney of his remaining assets, the divorce paperwork that would ensure Carmen left their marriage with nothing but her personal belongings. Phase 4 is watching them realize that crossing a Stevenson was the biggest mistake of their lives. Chapter 8. Consequences and Revelations. The Millbrook Gazette ran the story on the front page. Local couple arrested in elaborate fraud scheme. The accompanying photo showed Whitney and Carmen being led away in handcuffs, their faces twisted with shock and humiliation. Roger read the article over breakfast while Jake built towers with his cereal, blissfully unaware that his world had fundamentally changed overnight. At 8 years old, Jake knew his parents were having problems, but Roger had been careful to shield him from the worst details. "Dad, when is Mom coming home?" Jake asked, not looking up from his architectural project. "Your mom made some very bad choices, buddy. She's going to have to stay somewhere else for a while." Jake considered this with the serious expression he inherited from Roger. "Like a timeout?" Something like that. Roger's phone buzzed with a call from his divorce attorney, Patricia Mills, Detective Mills' sister and one of the most ruthless family lawyers in the state. "Good morning, Roger. I thought you'd want to know that Carmen's attorney contacted my office this morning. They want to negotiate." Roger stepped into the kitchen for privacy. "What kind of negotiation?" "Full confession in exchange for leniency. Carmen's willing to testify against Whitney, provide evidence of his other schemes, even help authorities contact his previous victims. In return, she wants joint custody of Jake and half the marital assets." "Absolutely not. I told them you'd say that." "They're also claiming the pregnancy might be yours, demanding a paternity test before any custody arrangements are finalized." Roger had expected this. "Schedule the test." "But Patricia, I want you to understand something clearly. Carmen gets nothing. No custody, no assets, no settlement. She collaborated in a plan to destroy our family and steal our future. I don't negotiate with terrorists." "Roger, the court might. The court will see evidence of systematic fraud, surveillance, and conspiracy. They'll see that she endangered our child by allowing strangers to monitor our home. They'll see that she was planning to steal my business and leave me bankrupt. What they won't see is any mercy from me." After hanging up, Roger found Jake still building with his cereal, completely absorbed in his project. This was what Roger was fighting for: his son's right to grow up with at least one parent who kept promises, told the truth, and protected the people they loved. Tim arrived an hour later with updates from the investigation. Whitney's scheme was even more extensive than they'd originally discovered. "We found 6 other families," Tim reported. "Kansas City, Denver, Phoenix, Seattle, Dallas, and Miami. Whitney's been running this operation for 7 years, moving from city to city, targeting successful family businesses through the wives." "How much money?" "Conservative estimate? About $40 million in destroyed businesses and stolen assets. He's been very good at covering his tracks, until now." Roger poured coffee for both of them. "What made him careless this time?" "You," Tim said simply. In every other case, he targeted men who trusted completely and never fought back when they discovered the betrayal. Divorce proceedings were usually settled quietly to avoid publicity. But you turned the tables on him. He underestimated his target. Badly. His previous victims were civilians, restaurant owners, small contractors, shop owners. He didn't realize he was trying to con a combat veteran who'd spent years learning to identify and eliminate threats. Roger thought about his tours in Afghanistan, where the difference between survival and death often came down to reading people correctly. Whitney had been skilled at manipulation, but he'd never learned to hide his true nature from someone trained to see through deception. "There's something else," Tim continued. "Whitney's investors are claiming they had no knowledge of the fraud. They're trying to recover their money through civil suits, but they've also agreed to testify against him in exchange for immunity." "Good. Let them burn each other down." Roger's phone rang. Carmen's name appeared on the screen, calling from the county jail. "Don't answer it," Tim advised. Roger stared at the phone until it stopped ringing. A moment later, a voicemail notification appeared. He deleted it without listening. "She'll keep calling," Tim said. "Then I'll keep ignoring her." Carmen had months to tell me the truth, months to choose our family over Whitney's promises. She made her choice. Jake wandered into the kitchen, his cereal project apparently completed. "Dad, can we go to the park today?" Roger scooped his son into his arms, feeling the solid weight of innocent trust. "Absolutely, buddy. We can do whatever you want." As they prepared to leave, Roger caught sight of their reflection in the hallway mirror. Father and son, faces similar enough to be unmistakably related, standing together in a house that was finally free of lies and surveillance. Roger had lost a wife, but he'd save his son from growing up in a home built on deception. In the long run, That was the victory that mattered most. Chapter 9. New Foundations. 6 months later, Roger stood in the same spot where he discovered the surveillance equipment in Carmen's hospital room. But today, he wasn't a bewildered husband stumbling through betrayal. He was a man who'd rebuilt his life on foundations that couldn't be shaken. The divorce had been finalized 3 weeks ago. The paternity test had confirmed what Roger already knew. Carmen's baby wasn't his. Whitney was the father, which only strengthened Roger's case for sole custody of Jake. Carmen had received nothing in the settlement except her personal belongings and a lifetime ban from contacting Jake without court supervision. She testified against Whitney in exchange for a reduced sentence, but the judge had still given her 18 months in federal prison for conspiracy and fraud. Whitney hadn't been as fortunate. Without Carmen's cooperation, he might have negotiated a lighter sentence. With her testimony detailing his 7-year pattern of fraud across multiple states, he'd received 12 years in federal prison and restitution orders that would keep him bankrupt for the rest of his life. "Dad, are you okay?" Jake asked, tugging on Roger's sleeve. They were visiting Carmen one last time before her transfer to federal prison. Jake deserved the chance to say goodbye to his mother, even if she'd forfeited any right to be part of his future. "I'm fine, buddy. Are you ready to see Mom?" Jake nodded solemnly. At 9 years old now, he understood more about what had happened than Roger wished was necessary. But Jake had also proven resilient, adapting to their new routine with the flexibility of childhood. Carmen looked smaller somehow, diminished by the orange jumpsuit and the weight of consequences she'd never expected to face. She cried when she saw Jake, reaching through the glass partition with desperate fingers. "Baby, I'm so sorry. Mommy made terrible mistakes, but I love you so much." Jake pressed his small hand against the glass, matching hers. "I love you too, Mom. But why did you lie to Dad?" The question hung in the air like a physical thing. Roger watched Carmen struggle for an answer that would make sense to a child without destroying what little remained of her relationship with her son. "Sometimes grown-ups make very bad choices," she said finally. "I thought I was helping our family, but I was wrong. Very, very wrong. Will you come home when you get out of timeout?" Carmen's eyes met Roger's through the glass. He saw her read the answer in his expression, saw her understand that there would be no reconciliation, no second chances, no path back to the family she destroyed. "No, baby. Daddy is going to take care of you now. He's a good man, and he'll give you everything you need." After the visit, Roger and Jake drove to their new house, a modern construction on the other side of town, built by Roger's own hands on land that had never known betrayal or surveillance. Every beam, every nail, every carefully measured angle represented a fresh start. "Dad," Jake said as they pulled into their driveway, "are you going to get married again?" Roger considered the question seriously. He'd been dating Dr. Sarah Chun, Jake's pediatrician, for 2 months now. She was kind, honest, and had never shown any interest in Roger's business beyond hoping he was happy in his work. "Maybe someday, buddy. Would that be okay with you? As long as she's nice to us and doesn't lie." Those are good requirements. That evening, after Jake was asleep, Roger sat on his back porch with a beer and Tim's final report on the Whitney investigation. All of Whitney's previous victims had been contacted. Several had joined civil suits that would ensure Whitney remained destitute even after his prison sentence ended. Carmen would serve her time and be released to start over somewhere else, presumably wiser but certainly poorer. The baby she'd been carrying had been born while she was in jail, a daughter who'd been placed for adoption immediately, with no contact information provided to either parent. Roger felt no satisfaction in Carmen's suffering, but he felt no regret either. She'd made choices, and choices had consequences. The surveillance equipment in their home, the betrayal of their marriage vows, the systematic destruction of everything he'd worked to build, all of it had been her decision. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "How did the visit go?" "Thinking of you and Jake." Roger smiled and typed back, "Hard but necessary." "Jake handled it well." "Dinner tomorrow." "Absolutely. I'll cook." Roger looked up at the stars, thinking about the future he was building with Jake. No more surveillance cameras, no more hidden agendas, no more wondering if the person sleeping beside him was friend or enemy. Tomorrow, he'd start work on a new contract, the real affordable housing project the city had approved last month. Honest work, honest profit, honest relationships with people who valued integrity over convenience. Benjamin Whitney had taught Roger an important lesson. Trust should be earned through actions, not words. Carmen had taught him an even more valuable lesson. Some betrayals were so fundamental that forgiveness became impossible without sacrificing self-respect. But Jake was teaching him the most important lesson of all, that love, real love, was built on truth and protected by strength. And that was a foundation strong enough to last forever. Roger finished his beer and went inside to check on his son one more time before bed. Jake was sleeping peacefully, his toy car clutched in one small fist. The same red Mustang he'd been playing with in the hospital room where this whole nightmare had begun. But nightmares, Roger had learned, were just dreams that hadn't found their proper ending yet. This one had. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.